Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I am delighted to be joined on this episode with Owen Smith. Owen has 2 decades of experience in the Canadian cannabis industry and possesses a wide range of subject matter expertise based on 2 decades working with everybody in the industry, from patients to advocates, dispensaries, producers and processors. He's also one of the most important men when it comes to edibles in Canada. So Owen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me, Owen.
Great to have you on, mate. Great to have you on. So you seem to be an integral part of one of the big sectors within the cannabis industry in Canada and getting the legislation and the legal process move forward. Can you maybe give everybody an overview of how long you've been in the industry, from, let's say, your general manager days in the dispensaries through to Aurora and where you're at now?
Well, I think I came in right at the sort of this wave of cannabis advocacy on the West Coast that happened in the mid-90s. My family and I moved here in the mid-90s from England, and they didn't have any idea they were plotting me down in such a hotbed of herbal medicine activism. But I started off with the university and college as a volunteer, and there's a man named Ted Smith who owned the very first cannabis dispensary in Canada. It's the longest running. It's still open. It's still operating. We'll talk about that. He introduced me to medical cannabis back in the early 2000s when I was at college and university. And not just medical, but the hemp, and really just opening my eyes to sort of the opposite view that I've been taught as a child, and many is taught during Prohibition. Cannabis is bad. But he taught how there's many positive uses for it, and I became his employee some years later. My younger sister contracted cancer, skin cancer, melanoma skin cancer, and she was at the end of the options from the doctor, and Ted Smith in the club at this time in the early 2000s helped her during the last months of her life. She did die after 1 year after contracting melanoma. It's a very dangerous, deadly condition. But she got benefited quality of life wise, being able to restore her abilities to eat and have a good sleep, which helped her communicate with her family during the last few months. You can imagine that's an invaluable time to be able to communicate with your loved one who's going to die. So I saw the value in that, and I wanted to help. So I became the baker and the product maker for Ted Smith. And it was only 1 year after I'd started that I got arrested in a local downtown apartment building in Victoria, BC. And in response to the arrest, we raised a constitutional challenge. And this was to the current medical marijuana laws, which only allowed in Canada people to have dried cannabis, and they'd have to smoke it, or they'd have to chew it and swallow it down whole, which didn't make any sense to us. We extracted cannabis into vegetable oils and butters and made food out of it to serve people with cancer and AIDS and lots of serious medical conditions, only helping those who had permanent physical diseases and ailments. And so taking it to court in 2012, we won in the BC Supreme Court. We then took it all the way up to the Supreme Court of Canada, where we had a unanimous victory there and instantly made edibles, oils, extracts legal for anybody in Canada to make.
This is the RV. Sorry for interrupting you. So that's the RvSmith challenge that you're describing there, is it?
That's right. Yes. And I'd be the Smith, but there's a Ted Smith as well, and we're not related. But we worked together all the way through. All the way through the communications campaign that went along with it. We launched a newspaper called Cannabis Digest, and we used that to help publicize the truth about the case while the newspapers muddied it up and got the details wrong. We published 10,000 copies and distributed them across the country just to make sure that people knew what was really going on. And after we did win in the Supreme Court of Canada, the government were forced to make laws they called Section 56 laws. And they introduced a new limits called 3% limits on the strength of the edibles and oils. And this was a limit that wasn't established in the court, but this is something that governments can do. They make laws here in Canada, and courts chop them down, chop them up, make them null and void, the parts which aren't constitutional. And so the government, in my opinion, is reintroduced an unconstitutional limit, an arbitrary limit on the strength of the edibles. And that has carried over into the legal system. So if you want to buy legal recreational cannabis, edible wise, you're restricted to a very low dose. And while that's good, helps people get in, newbies especially, who we really cared about, who we were really working for, is the most sick and most vulnerable, most in need, and those people need higher doses. And so we continue to provide higher dose cannabis against the law in Victoria, BC, to over 3,000, or actually more than that. There's quite a lot of people who access cannabis through the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club. This is the longest running dispensary in Canada. And this club was recently charged $6.5 million. A fine was sent from the provincial government to basically just shut the club down, which is not going to work. In response to that, another constitutional challenge has been raised. A big 700-page document full of patient stories and full of legal arguments has been in Health Canada's hands for over a year now. And we're pushing for an exemption to the Cannabis Act so that we can continue to provide those higher strength cannabis products to those who have higher needs. And so that's something that we protest in the street for still these days. Just last week, I was down in the front of City Hall in Victoria, BC, doing a live trivia cannabis game show with a crowd of people, where we showed the public that we can be a fun, open community of people, very knowledgeable, and teach a few things while we're out in the public. So it's been that way all along, trying to bring cannabis out of the shadows, trying to be as out there as we can, come out of the closet as a cannabis community, and that's a lot of fun. So it's not all serious.
Amazing. So after you guys were successful with the RvSmith challenge, what was it like then creating channels of communication with the relevant parties to be able to ensure that what you guys wanted got enacted?
Well, it's what we had argued with the Harper government all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The Harper government in Canada wanted to introduce mandatory minimum sentencing for what I was doing, and also for growing more than 6 cannabis plants. These are new laws at the time that we protested against. So the government in Canada, especially the Conservative government, has been very oppositional to cannabis. And so no easy communications could be made there. Here in BC, it's a little bit different, and we've had things like the Sensible BC campaign, which came before legalization, where we tried to decriminalize cannabis. But that didn't work. We have a much higher bar for, we have to get more votes than Washington or Colorado, who at that time, their voting initiatives got them legalized cannabis. So we've had to fight really hard in Canada. It's a bit of a high bar, I think, for getting this out. But with the Liberal government now, there's since they put in the Cannabis Act, they have a 4-year review of that act, which has been delayed thanks to COVID. But while working with Aurora Cannabis, I helped to put together some suggestions and some ideas that the government might use to improve the system, including the obvious ones that I just mentioned. But there's a lot of other ways we can improve cannabis in Canada too, and a lot of fun that could still come to what is really over-regulated, hyper-regulated industry, which you can expect because we're the first in the world. But what I'm excited about is tourism. We want to encourage people to come from Ireland to enjoy a nice farm tour from Cannabis Tours, enjoy our beautiful natural environment and the finest cannabis that you'll ever see or experience in your life, and a touch of the culture that's grown up here too, which is a lot of fun. So tourism is certainly a part of that.
Incredible. Yeah, I think tourism is it's one thing you haven't heard come out of Canada yet is any sort of promotion or any sort of cannabis tourism. Whereas we even in Ireland we hear things about Vegas and Arizona where you can go over there. A lot of people go to California. You've got New York coming online now, which is gonna, I think, be a huge hub. Yeah, I think the channel of communication between the Canadian tourism companies who may be operating these tours and Europe don't seem to be as clear as yet.
It can be a lot of fun. Before legalization, I operated a couple of consumption lounges, they call vapor lounges, where you'd have cannabis cocktails being served. You come and have a Bloody Mary Jane or another one of these that we made up, fun names, and the dab bar laid out. So you could learn how to dab. I'm not sure how much dabbing goes on in Ireland, but here it's very popular on the West Coast. And teach you how to do these things a little bit safely. Have somebody there who can instruct newcomers, people maybe coming from overseas. You need a little bit of instruction on how to consume cannabis safely, but not a lot. And it's something that attracts a lot of culture. So we'd have musicians coming in, comedians, sort of a central hub in a way for the community. And it's so nice to be able to come out of the woodwork and come together and have a centralized place to consume and communicate and socialize. I feel like after so much social isolation in the world, we could all use sitting down and having a nice cup of vape or whatever it is we're going to be able to do.
Very interesting. So quickly before we go, what are you looking forward to over the next 12 to 18 months in the Canadian cannabis industry? What's the one thing you've got your eyes on?
Well, I definitely, like I say, the consumption lounges is an issue which is on the forefront of the British Columbia government. But there's a few others. I mean, it's slow moving in terms of development of the industry here. COVID was part of that, but we've just had released the direct delivery system. So finally, BC producers can sell directly to BC retailers without having to go through the government warehouse. We just had a strike here in BC where no retailers could purchase any cannabis because the BC government controls that channel. But fortunately now that is over and the direct delivery is in. And the next part of that is called farm gate, which is having a store at your farm so that people can come to the farm, meet you, maybe go on a tour and go to your gift shop and purchase some cannabis there while they're on vacation, while they're on a tour, and take that at least while they're in Canada. Certainly don't take it on the plane with you. So farm gate and direct delivery are the most exciting two things that are coming to British Columbia, but consumption lounges can be hot on the heels. And I look forward to the community being able to come together more. Just this year, we had our first major cannabis convention in Victoria, which is the capital of British Columbia. And we were able to take over the Empress Hotel, which is this landmark piece of architecture in downtown Victoria. And we had a vapor lounge right in the center of town, elevated in front of everybody. It really felt like times had changed. And so I'm hoping for more of that, more of us to be able to share ideas like this and develop the cannabis industry creatively.
Amazing. That's been great. It's been fantastic chatting to you. A wealth of information already so far. I think everybody's going to have loved that episode. Hopefully, I'll be back on to you now and I'll get some suggestions for people to talk to in the direct delivery, the farm gate, and the consumption lounge area, so we can inform everybody over in Europe what to expect the next time they go to Canada on holidays.
That sounds great. Yeah. And if you'd like any suggestions for people to talk to over here, I know some great people.
I will indeed. Thank you very much, Owen, for taking part. Everybody, will see you on the next episode.